So we covered the side-by-side. The next most common, would be the biplane. We got one canopy in front, one canopy behind. Looks something like that from the side or from behind. Very common, you can see why they would call it a biplane. Like two wings right over on top of each other. All right, if you're above 1,000 feet, you're 100% certain they're not entangled, get rid of the main. The way we do it, very similar to the side-by-side. Left hand, left rear riser of the rear. Left on left of the rear. Right hand on the cutaway handle. Pull that riser down, cause the canopy in the back to dive off to the left, get at least 1/2 canopy of separation, cut away, let go, and let it go. Make sure you get the canopy to go all the way over there, get them far enough apart. All you need is 1/2 canopy, and you got plenty to get rid of it. All right, so here's a great picture of what it looks like having the main in front and the reserve in back. One of the most important things we have to look for with the biplane is where is the bag and pilot chute from the main. With the main in front, we want to make sure that the bag and pilot chute is up on top of the reserve and not down in the lines. In this photograph, you can see very clearly that there's no bag and pilot chute underneath in the lines of the reserve. You can actually see the shadow of the pilot chute on top of the reserve. So that is a good sign. That's what you want to see. Now, if we go to the video here, you'll notice we see that pilot chute dancing up on top up there. That's a good place for it. If that pilot chute is underneath the canopy in the back, the reserve, and it's in the lines of the reserve, we cannot move either canopy. If you try to separate those canopies with that pilot chute under there, it will collapse the main parachute into the reserve parachute, and you won't have any good canopies left. So if that pilot chute is underneath, you're landing with 2 canopies. All right, here's a good example right here of left on left of the rear. Left hand on the rear, right hand on the cutaway pillow. Pull it down. Here we go. And just look at that canopy in the back. Separate, separate, separate. Cut away, let go. And you're clear. All right, so what if the canopies are entangled? You're below 1,000 feet, or you just aren't sure. In this case, let's land the biplane. To land a biplane, we're going to steer the front canopy using the rear risers on the front parachute. And what we want to do is put just a couple inches of pressure on the rear risers so that the front canopy compresses against the rear canopy. We want the cells of the rear canopy to latch into and lock into the lines of the front canopy. That way it doesn't slide around. So if we slow that front one down just enough, we'll get a good lock between the two. Then we just steer the front canopy and the rear canopy will follow. Again, we do all of these very slow, very soft, because we don't want to do anything radical. If we like how they're flying, keep flying them that way. So all we're going to do is fly this down. Now remember, the side-by-side, it wants to glide. It's had that 4-to-1 glide ratio. The biplane does not have a good glide ratio. The biplane is a 1-to-1 at best. And the reason is, look at the canopies. The front canopy is 2 nose down. The back canopy is 2 nose up. So neither canopy is in its happy place. So they still will land you very soft, very easy to control, but they have no forward speed. Why do you need to know this? Because if I have to land the biplane, I want to turn final right on top of the target because I'm not going to go very far. If there's more than 10 knots of wind with a biplane, you're probably going backwards. That's the most likely scenario. Again, don't attempt to flare either or both canopies. You'll just make them angry. Keep them together, keep them touching, PLF or slide. Right here is a great example of what it looks like to control the front canopy in the biplane. So I'll hit the play, here we go. So I'm gonna grab those 2 rear risers on the front canopy, put a little bit of pressure on them, and then I could actually make that really soft turn. Now in this case, I was able to move the back canopy. Don't worry about that. You can do that if you want to, but because they weren't really entangled, I just moved that for better video. The next video here, this guy, if you look at his altimeter, it's reading 1,800 feet. However, he's got his brakes released on his main, and all of a sudden his reserve's about to come out right here. So he's just flying along, and uh-oh, here comes the reserve. And you noticed how it went right up into a biplane. And that's typical of what happens if one canopy opens after the other one's been flying. It's also typical if the main is in front and the reserve is in the back. Because if the reserve is in the front and the main is in the back, it will always go to a side-by-side because of the longer lines on the main. So that first video showed him dealing with it. So he has two options here. He could either get rid of the main, separate and get rid of the main, or he can land the biplane. This guy chose to land the biplane. So if we watch this video here, you notice he's using the rear risers to control it. And he's keeping the canopies touching. He's not doing anything radical. So he's doing nice soft turns here, not letting that back canopy move around too much. Now the one thing he does is he does fly out over this power line. If I'm under two canopies, I'm not going to be anywhere near any power lines. I'm going to this is an unusual situation, so I'm going to land unusually far out in the field, away from any obstacles. He does a great job. We got a good shadow shot. That's one of the reasons I left this video all the way to the end, is he does a really nice job of videoing his own landing. And you notice how he's keeping that nice and mellow, not doing anything radical. And he actually, I'm not sure if he flares at the end. It looks like he does. It didn't really make any difference. The parachutes landed the way they did. This dude didn't get the memo about the biplane not having a good glide ratio. So he's going to open low. His Cypress fires, his reserve comes out, and they go into the biplane. Now, when he first looks down, he's over a pretty good little open field. But he sees on the other side of the road a big open backyard. So he thinks he's going to glide right over the highway, right over the power lines, and go into that backyard. What he doesn't know is the biplane doesn't glide very far. So what he does here is he looks down, he's like, okay, I'm going to just go with the biplane. It doesn't look entangled. I would have got rid of the main if I could have, but he's okay. He's got it under control. So now he thinks he's going to that backyard. He still thinks he's going to that backyard. And now he's getting ready to cross that power line, and he's not quite getting the glide ratio he was hoping for. And about right here, if you look at it, you'll fly right into it. So look away, steer away. Quit looking at the house. Quit looking at the chimney. And boom. All right, well, he got kind of lucky. One canopy on one side of the roof, the other canopy on the other side of the roof. I guess that's the advantage of having two canopies. And he didn't roll off the roof. But obviously a great example of the biplane just doesn't go anywhere. Now we're going to talk about a little variation in the biplane, and that's the offset biplane. In other words, we could have the canopy in the back could be offset to the left, or it could be offset to the right. So let's talk about these because they do have a little quirk that comes with them. First of all, let's go with the easy one. If it's offset to the left, well, all we got to do is check for entanglement, and then we're going to go left hand on the left rear riser of the rear canopy, right hand on the cutaway pillow, separate, 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 cut away the main, land the reserve. Offset to the left, no big deal. Where it gets weird is when it's offset to the right, because we need to move this canopy left so that our right hand is on the cutaway handle. So what we're going to do in this situation is bring it halfway to the middle and stop, then go the rest of the way. Now you could separate this one and put it over here, but that wouldn't be the canopy in the rear. So to keep things consistent, let's just move the canopy in the back. And all we got to do is move it to the middle, stop, and then go the rest of the way and get rid of the main. Now, the reason we have to stop in the middle is because I had several times when I was practicing this where I took the canopy from the right all the way to the left, and when I went from all the way over here to all the way over here, the right front of the canopy I was moving grabbed the steering line of the front canopy and turned it. And that was a moment for me. It's like, aha! When it was going really fast, it built up speed and it had enough energy to move forward and pull on that steering line. But when I went halfway and then the rest of the way, it never did that. So that's how you would deal with that with the offset if they're not entangled. All right, so in this video, I'm gonna go ahead and hit play. That's just kind of a demonstration of what it looks like to be offset left. And then there's offset right. My cameraman was supposed to be behind me on this, so it doesn't show it so good. But what you can see right here in this part of the video is you can see how that front canopy is nose down and that back canopy is nose up. That's why it doesn't have a good glide ratio. Still lands fine, but doesn't glide very well. All right, so continuing with this offset biplane, here's the other weird quirk about it. So if they're entangled or we're low and we don't have time and we're gonna land it, if it's offset to the right, then I'm gonna fly it like a biplane because it's still a biplane. So I'm gonna steer the front canopy, but because it's sort of like a side-by-side, I'm also gonna treat it like in between. So I'm gonna steer the front canopy, making all my turns towards the other canopy. So if it's offset to the right and I have to land it, I'm probably going to do a right-hand landing pattern. I went a little too far there. If it's offset to the left, I'm going to do a left-hand landing pattern. So because it's sort of like a side-by-side and it's sort of like a biplane, I treat it. It's still a biplane, so I steer the front, but it's sort of like a side-by-side, so I always steer towards the other canopy, never pulling them apart. Again, airspeed is very slow, very low glide ratio. Just come in and land. Don't try to flare. Just do a PLF or slide or run.